Aryan Khan was in jail for almost 4 weeks last year. In jail for almost 4 weeks when he was arrested with no drugs on him. When there was no direct evidence to link him that he had been buying or selling drugs. When within a few days we also found out that there was no medical test done to tell us whether he had at that time been consuming drugs. He was still in jail for almost 4 weeks when the NCB went to town claiming they had a very solid case against him and the others, claiming it was a big international conspiracy, claiming that not only was he a regular consumer of drugs, he was also involved in commercial selling at large quantities. Every day they spoke about how much drugs they were actually finding and the number of peddlers that they were tracking down. 8 months later, those tall claims have fallen apart. 8 months later, NCB's case against Aryan Khan at least has completely fallen apart, and the Narcotics Control Bureau now says we have no evidence against Aryan Khan, Shah Rukh Khan's son. What changed? How did it all turn on its head within 8 months? Was it just a case where there was no case to begin with? Or was it a shoddy investigation that has brought us to this point where we now cannot find evidence? According to the Narcotics Control Bureau, they say that they have followed the judicial principle, the investigation principle to say you need to find and you need to have evidence beyond reasonable doubt to charge sheet somebody. So because they did not find evidence that would be beyond reasonable doubt against Aryan, his name is not mentioned in the charge sheet. The NCB DG has also very clearly said that this is because the preliminary probe was shoddy, that there were lapses. In effect, in one way or the other, the Narcotics Control Bureau is saying, yes, when we arrested Aryan Khan, he did not have any drugs on him, and two, the preliminary probe was full of lapses, which is why we don't have enough evidence. In a sense, they're putting the entire blame on the former NCB official Samir Wankhede, who now stands to face possible action, or so some of the media reports are indicating. That's what the MHA wants. So today we're going to talk about this, and without really wasting any time, let me bring in a very special guest, one of the biggest names we have in the legal arena. Ujjwal Nikam, Special Public Prosecutor for Maharashtra, joins me this evening. Mr. Nikam, now, I want to start off with one very basic, simple question. If you listen to what everybody is saying, it's being said that Aryan Khan has been given clean chit. But the NCB says, well, because the investigation initially was so bad that we couldn't find the right amount of evidence. How do you view this? How should one understand what is being told to us?
And we had to carefully listen what Mr. Pradhan, the DG of NCB, has today said. He mentioned 3 facts. Firstly, he said that SIT was constituted in this matter to probe into detail. Secondly, he said that there are the 5-6 persons against whom they did not find any evidence, and therefore they have not been charge sheeted. And again, in those 6 persons, Aryan Khan is one of the culprits. Thirdly, he said that our investigation is still in progress. Now, if we will carefully see all these 3 statements, then Mr. Pradhan has made it very clear that still investigation is pending. It clearly means that they have not given any clean sheet to Aryan Khan. What he has said, that our further probe is going on, and we don't find any evidence to corroborate the WhatsApp chat. Now, I failed to understand one statement of Mr. Pradhan that he said that there is no evidence beyond reasonable doubt. The question of beyond reasonable doubt arises only in the trial and not at the time of filing of the charge sheet. What is required at the time of the filing of the charge sheet and for framing of the charge, whether there is a prima facie evidence. Mr. Pradhan has indirectly admitted that there is a evidence, prima facie evidence means WhatsApp chat, but they don't get any corroborative material. If NCB officer had made an allegation that Aryan Khan had a connection with the international mafia drugs and his WhatsApp chat discloses, then we don't know what type of NCB has collected evidence from abroad. Whether they have collected or they would like to collect it or not, or whether they won't get it. If they won't get it even after probing into abroad, then they should have made it very clear that there is no evidence. But by keeping this hanging prosecution, it's not a good thing. But secondly, I must appreciate the step taken by the NCP to say that there is no evidence against the 5%, including the Aryan Khan, to connect with the crime. This is a fair statement. But at the same time, he is very careful in the caution in saying that since there was some loopholes in the initial investigation and therefore SIT was constituted. So we don't know what SIT found, but at present it doesn't mean that Aryan Khan has been given clean sheet. That is absolutely wrong perception. Still NCB has kept that card a reserve, and if they find any further evidence in the further inquiry, they may prosecute him also. We don't know.
Right. So, Mr. Nikam, now there are two things that we need to look at. One is the case so far, what they have or haven't found, and two, the blame that has been put on Samir Wankhede and the investigating officer at that time to say, which is in the SIT report, and we'll talk about that. But I just want to quickly recap some of the things that came from, of course, the DG NCB's press conference, then his individual interviews that he's given to multiple, media organizations where he speaks about it. And here is how I have broken it down for our viewers. NCB had earlier claimed that Aryan had been a regular consumer of drugs, and they said they had these WhatsApp chats, most of which were actually allegedly of 2018-2019, that gave this indications. Now the NCB is saying, well, the WhatsApp chats are not linked to our case and so they are of no use to us. NCB had then said that Aryan is not a first time offender. In fact, he had been providing drugs to others. There is no evidence mentioned on that front or even any explanation given as to what happened to that claim or that lead of theirs. Then NCB said that Aryan knew his friend was carrying drugs. So what if Aryan was not in possession, his friend was, and thereby they used this term conscious possession at that time when they were making the argument for bail. Now they say, well, the friend himself told us that Aryan did not know I was carrying the drug, so that claim is also now gone out of the window. They claimed it's an international conspiracy. Today, the DG in some of his interviews has said, well, we have not found any evidence of any joint international conspiracy of all of these 15-20 people together. They were definitely not together in one big global conspiracy. That's what we can say now. Individually, if there is, I don't know. Like Mr. Nikam is rightly pointing out, investigation is not over. We don't know what will come up next. So these were the big claims of NCB 8 months ago and how they have now turned on their heads largely for many of these points. But Mr. Nikam, I see in a lot of the writings and verbal communication that the entire blame is being put on Mr. Wankhede. While yes, I can agree that you can say that the NCB initially faulted by not carrying out a medical test or initially faulted by not doing an exhaustive search of the ship and they let the ship go. But the fact that, you didn't have testimonies, you arrested other peddlers, you couldn't get anything, you spoke of an international conspiracy, but nothing came through. Clearly, there was, an attempt to make it seem bigger when they had no evidence.
Tanvi, you are perfectly right, because one of the contention of the DG of NCB that they did not get any evidence in respect of the physical possession, the word which he had used about the physical possession. But if we'll see the allegation which were leveled by the NCB against the Aryan Khan, that he is one of the party to the criminal conspiracy. Now, the law of criminal conspiracy is well settled that it is not necessary that each conspirator should participate in the criminal conspiracy and whether he was knowing the design of the criminal conspiracy. I don't know whether NCB has investigated from the point of the criminal conspiracy. If initial allegation of NCB was that Aryan Khan was a party to the larger global criminal conspiracy, then on what basis the NCB has made that allegation? On the basis of the WhatsApp chat. If on the WhatsApp chat they had made allegation, what type of investigation they have done? And now DG says that the allegation cannot be proved beyond reasonable doubt. You see, the investigating agency can't take the role of the judge. It is for the judge to decide whether the guilt of a person is proved beyond reasonable doubt. What is the duty of the investigating agency? To collect the evidence, prima facie evidence, to connect the accused with the crime, and they put forth that evidence in the court of law. Now, what DG has made a statement that the investigation is still complete, we are still investigating. Then what happened about your name? His name has been mentioned in the FIR. You have arrested him. You dodge in the jail. Then what precaution? Why you have not taken this precaution? Why you have defamed the persecuted person? So all these questions will crop up. But fairly, I would say that it is a good step taken by the NCB, but by making a very clear statement that our investigation is still going on, it clearly means that at present they don't want to absolve Aryan Khan from the said case. That is the clear signal what they would like to give it.
Yes. In fact, since you mentioned the WhatsApp chats, let me ask you this question. It's been repeatedly debated when the Sushant Singh case came up and even now in the Aryan Khan case. What's the legality involved? Does this instance also make it clearer that WhatsApp chats by themselves mean nothing and we should stop jumping about them unless and until there is actual physical evidence that backs these chats?
WhatsApp chat is a prima facie evidence. But WhatsApp chat can also be fabricated, concocted also. While dealing the case in the Pramod Mahajan murder case, I was a special public prosecutor fighting against the Praveen Mahajan. In the Pramod Mahajan phone, we got a WhatsApp message, an SMS. And that SMS came from the Praveen Mahajan. And that is just prior to the death of the Pramod Mahajan. And we have taken a stand that the contents of the said SMS message is nothing but so a dying declaration because the threats were given by the Praveen Mahajan. Praveen Mahajan counsel took a stand that this can be also fabricated and they prove it. So WhatsApp chat, no doubt, is a prima facie material, but that is not a 100% conclusive evidence. But if WhatsApp chat found in the mobile of a person, that the holder of that mobile phone has to give an explanation as to how that WhatsApp chat come and from whom it had come. Whether the NCB has investigated the person who has sent those WhatsApp chat to Aryan Khan.
Yes.
What was his connection with Aryan Khan? Where did he reside? All these questions comes in only. But the question of proving a case beyond reasonable doubt, that is beyond the scope of NCB. I don't know on what basis NCB says that those evidence can be beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes.
What is the duty of the investigating agency? To collect the prima facie evidence and to put before the court, and it is the duty of the court to decide. But fair enough, if NCB director says that there is no worthy evidence to connect with Aryan Khan with the crime, then they can clearly come out with that case. Why they should keep the pending against the Aryan Khan also?
Yes. So they say that one, and it was very clear even in the press release by the Narcotics Control Bureau, that Aryan Khan, when arrested, was not found in possession of drugs. That's a very important point. He wasn't carrying any drugs when he was arrested. Now, had he consumed or was he going to consume drugs? There was no medical test done, which is mentioned in the SIT report. And I'm going to pull out some excerpts even from that SIT report where it is said that there was no medical test conducted of Aryan Khan. The NCB is saying this was one of the lapses which has weakened their case. So now they can't even say if he was already high on any kind of toxic substance or drugs. Then the NCB also in its SIT report says that the mobile phone of Aryan Khan was voluntarily handed over by him to the investigating officer. It may be noted that such handing over was not followed by a formal seizure procedure as laid down by the law. So essentially they are saying that because his phone wasn't seized protocol wise, none of those extracts perhaps can be used as evidence. They also go on to then quote a Supreme Court ruling to say, what is the evidentiary value of WhatsApp messages these days? Anything can be created and deleted on social media these days. We don't attach any value to WhatsApp messages. Essentially saying that if there are extracts of WhatsApp messages, they can't be used until, like you said, Mr. Nikam, the full context is given, legally the phone is seized, the entire trail is put into place, and then you provide evidence to substantiate it, which has not happened in this case. Now, what would be your learning from this entire episode? What would you say is the learning for the NCB, maybe also for the media?
Tanvi, I must say that the NCB has given a judgment of acquittal in favor of Aryan Khan. See, this is not expected by the NCB. What is the duty of the, SIT? To collect the material and to produce before the court. It is for the court to take the call. I can understand there are serious lapses in the initial investigation, but that lapses of the investigation, that benefit will be given by the court of law and not by the investigator. So and there are the number of the judgments, if investigating officer commit mistake, negligence, inaction, it should not affect the testimony of the other witnesses. I don't know what is the hard evidence against the Aryan Khan. But if the whole prosecution case is based upon only on the WhatsApp chat, then that is the prima facie evidence. And it could have been tried by the court, and the court could have given the finding. Or otherwise, you produce all the material before the court and let the court take the stand, and the prosecution will say that you withdraw the prosecution from them. That is the correct step that NCB ought to have taken. What SIT should have produced the material. This is the material produced against the Aryan Khan, and it is for the court to take the call. This is not a sufficient material to frame the charge against him. How NCB can discharge the role of a judge? This is the most important thing. But fair enough. If NCB wants to say that this is a malicious prosecution, then NCB should have filed a petition in the court and should have said.
So you are saying either which ways NCB has not gone the entire way. If it is it has the will and the commitment to actually fairly investigate this case, they should have submitted whatever evidence they have against Aryan Khan in the charge sheet and let it go to the court for the court to decide whether charges should be framed.
Tanvi, absolutely you are right.
Right. And if it's not, and if it's a false case, then also they should have gone to the court and presented that evidence to say, look, this is the problem, now you tell us what has to be done, correct?
What SIT has done, SIT has done the role of investigator, prosecutor and the judge. So all three roles were discharged by the SIT, which is not expected.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Nikam. I think that was extremely helpful and insightful. What you've said here, very, very crucial points made and big questions put out there for people to also understand, and perhaps the Narcotics Control Bureau to now explain to us. I must point out that media reports suggest that the Home Ministry wants inquiry and action against Amir Wankhede for the so-called shoddy investigation that has completely now led to crumbling of this case as it seems. But is there more that meets the eye? We don't know. Those are the questions that several of our legal experts are actually raising. Thank you, Mr. Nikam, for joining us. Very quickly, let me recap this for everybody who's joined in right now. Aryan Khan completely now free at this point because the Narcotics Control Bureau has said we have not found sufficient against him. He has not been named in the charge sheet. The Narcotics Control Bureau says there was no international conspiracy as they had claimed 8 months ago. They say they did not find any drugs on Aryan Khan as was claimed by Aryan's team 8 months ago. They also went on to say that we found evidence against 14 people, and those are the people who will now face action, and a complaint has been filed. They have also in their SIT report very clearly put the blame on the investigating officer. They have said it appears that the IO was motivated to implicate Aryan Khan Aryan Khan's phone was taken away illegally and the integrity of the extracts from the phones are suspects. Remember that this case actually turned on its head right in the first 2 weeks when the witnesses to the first Panchnama and one of the key witnesses there came out and claimed that there was some kind of an extortion attempt going on, and that this entire case was being fabricated to trap Aryan Khan, perhaps in the hope to get out some money. Prabhakar Sale later on died of a heart attack, is no more. But the minute this witness's confession on camera came out, the entire case turned upside down. And then came more details of the witnesses that the NCB had used to file their Panchnama about the raid and the arrest. And these were suspicious witnesses with a suspicious past, with not the optimum kind of credible background that they should have had to be part of this case. There itself was the first problem that appeared. And then came more information. Sameer Wankhede was then removed. An SIT was formed. Investigation was handed over to another team. 8 months later, we are told there was no case against Aryan Khan. Unfortunately, at the end of all of this, there was a family that underwent a lot of trauma. There was also perhaps a bit of truth that will never come out about this case. One can only expect that justice is done for those who try to break rules and indulge in wrong practices will be held accountable, whether they were on NCB or outside the NCB. Doesn't really matter. I hope this edition of Simplified helped you understand how this case really fell apart in the last 8 months and what happens next. Thank you so much for joining us.